Life has a way of surprising you, especially when you think everything is under control. I never thought that coming back home after college would put me in such a strange position. But here I am, Tyler Hayes. Hayes. I'm about to share how everything changed. Returning home to live with my dad Jack and my stepmom Sarah seemed like a good idea at first. The job market was tough, and staying with them while job hunting made sense financially. Sarah had been my stepmom for 14 years, and we always got along well. She was 60, but she had this youthful energy and grace that made her seem much younger. She was into fitness, yoga, and running, and her short, silver-streaked hair framed her face perfectly. She wasn't just a stepmom, she'd always been more like a friend. The first few weeks back home were comfortable. Dad worked long hours managing his construction business, while Sarah ran her small online business. From my room, I spent my days sending resumes and preparing for interviews. That morning started just like any other. I had a big job interview later that day and was getting ready in the bathroom. The steam from my shower fogged up the mirror, and I was carefully shaving when I heard a soft knock on the door. Sarah's voice came through, asking if she could quickly grab some medicine from the cabinet. Without thinking, I told her to come in. We'd always been laid back about stuff like this. She came in wearing her usual robe and reached up to the medicine cabinet. What happened next seemed to happen in slow motion. As she stretched, her robe caught on the cabinet handle, and the door swung open. In that moment, everything froze. Our eyes met in the misty mirror, and we both realized what had just happened. Sarah quickly adjusted her robe, her cheeks turning bright red. "I'm so sorry, Tyler," she whispered. "Please don't tell your dad." She hurried out of the bathroom. I couldn't concentrate on my interview afterward, the morning incident replaying in my mind over and over, bringing up feelings I never expected to have for Sarah. She avoided me for the rest of the day, and dinner that night was awkwardly quiet. The next morning I found a note under my door. In her neat handwriting, Sarah asked if we could talk privately when Dad left for work. My heart raced as I read her words, knowing whatever was about to happen would change everything. We met in the kitchen after Dad left. Sarah sat across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "About yesterday," she started, her voice trembling slightly. She admitted that the bathroom incident had brought up feelings she didn't expect, feelings she thought she was too old to have. I couldn't stop myself from admitting that I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The tension between us was thick, both of us knowing that something had changed. Sarah reached across the table and gently touched my hand, a simple gesture that sent electricity through my body. She sat down at the table and picked up an apple from the plate. She looked at me in the eyes and was surprisingly soothing. Before I even realized it, we were standing close to each other, the morning sunlight streaming through the window highlighting Sarah's face. We moved closer and our lips met in a brief, hesitant kiss. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. We pulled away, and the weight of what had just happened hit us both. Sarah stepped back, covering her mouth with her hand. "This is wrong," she whispered, but her eyes told a different story. I knew I should walk away, but something kept me there. The next few days were filled with stolen glances and careful distance. We both tried to act like everything was normal around Dad, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Every accidental touch, every moment alone, was charged with unspoken feelings. I started finding excuses to stay home more, pretending to work on job applications, but really hoping for moments alone with Sarah. She seemed to do the same, always finding reasons to be where I was. The guilt started to show on her face, her usual calm demeanor starting to crack. "We need to talk about this," she said one day, closing the door behind her. She sat next to me on the couch, close enough that I could smell her familiar lavender perfume, the same scent that had comforted me during high school breakups. Now that scent stirred something entirely different in me. We talked for hours about how wrong this was, about how right it felt, about how impossible our situation was. But the sound of the front door slamming cut our conversation short. Dad had come home early, and we scrambled to act normal as we heard him entering the house. Sitting across from Dad at dinner, the weight of our secret felt unbearable. He talked about his day, unaware of the afternoon Sarah and I had spent together. Sarah barely touched her food that night. Later, I found a note in my room. "Meet me in the backyard at midnight." I knew I should ignore it, put an end to everything, but I couldn't resist. A note for me. "I can't stop thinking about you, Tyler," she wrote. "I know it's terrible, but I've never felt like this before." Sitting together in the cool night air, our legs brushing, I couldn't ignore the heat between us. The night was chilly, but I felt like I was on fire. "I feel it too," I whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air. We kissed again, this time with more passion, Sarah's hands exploring my chest as mine traced the curve of her waist. The forbidden nature of it all made the connection even more intense. A dog barking in the distance broke us apart, reminding us of the danger we were in. We were out in the open, where anyone could see us. The risk felt insane, but Sarah stood up, straightened her clothes, and said, "We can't do this here." Her eyes, though, held a promise of more. We agreed to be more careful, to find safer moments to be together. The next few days were torture, pretending everything was normal around Dad while our shared secret burned between us. Every family dinner became a challenge of self-retreat. I started having trouble sleeping, lying awake thinking about Sarah in the next room. The walls seemed too thin, the house too small for what was happening between us. One morning, I found Sarah alone in the kitchen again. The memory of our first kiss in that very spot hung in the air. Without a word, she stepped into my arms, fitting perfectly against me. We knew we were playing with fire. Each touch, each stolen moment brought us closer to being caught, but the pull between us was impossible to resist. Sarah tried to keep boundaries, but every time we were alone, those boundaries vanished. The tension built each day. Simple moments like brushing past each other in the hallway or catching each other's eyes across the dinner table became charged with meaning. Every accidental touch while doing dishes seemed to say more than words could. The next morning, optimism filled the cabin, and it seemed everyone was in good spirits. Dad noticed something was different, but he chalked it up to stress from job hunting. If only he knew the truth about the change in his son and wife's behavior. As the days passed, our connection grew stronger. What began as physical attraction deepened into something more complicated. We shared thoughts and feelings we'd never told anyone. The guilt was always there, but it was overshadowed by the intensity of what we were feeling. Chalamet. One morning, everything changed. Dad had already left for work when I found Sarah in the kitchen making coffee. She wore the same silk robe from that first morning, but this time there was no accident. We locked eyes across the kitchen. Without a word, we moved toward each other, the coffee forgotten. Sarah brushed against me, her hand sliding beneath my shirt. This kiss was different, desperate, hungry, filled with weeks of pent-up desire. I lifted her onto the kitchen counter, standing between her legs as we kissed. Her robe slipped open, but this time there was no awkward apology, no rush to cover up. Her skin was soft beneath my hands, her breathing heavy against my neck. What happened next was inevitable. We came together, lost in the moment. The kitchen, the same place where I'd eaten breakfast for years, became the stage for our first real intimate encounter. Afterward, we held each other in silence. The reality of what we'd just done slowly seeped back in. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, reminding us that time hadn't stopped, even though it felt like it had. "We can't take this back," Sarah whispered, her voice a mix of satisfaction and concern. From then on, we found creative ways to be together. Early mornings before Dad woke up, afternoons when he was at work, and quiet moments in the garden after dark. Sarah seemed to grow younger with each passing day, her happiness shining through. I found myself falling deeper into our physical connection, and it was clear it was becoming something even more emotional.